having a kid just gives you these special superpowers, that extra push just to keep going, because you can't stop. Like when you get home from work, it's actually more chaotic than being at work. That
Sure.
5 till 7 p.m. bedtime rush, like any mum will know, is like the hardest part of your day.
Some people do that, but that's the price you pay for wanting to have everything exactly the way you want it, right?
You can have everything you want, but you don't get it at the same time.
Would you say it's kind of changed your career focus?
I was really career focused and very passionate, and like really, really wanted to do surgery. Like if you asked me like if I'd sacrifice everything, I'd be like, yeah, 110%. And then you go back and it doesn't become as important. Like actually what's probably more important is that I actually get occasional weekend off to see my family and like not miss out on things like that.
There's certain milestones that you don't want to miss your child
Yeah.
going through, and you only see your child growing up once, right? Don't you think that it's perhaps something that you would have planned, because had you not had the child, maybe you could now step up into your surgical career or training more comfortably? Welcome back to Endoscope, the educational podcast where we look into the guts of various different topics and explore things that matter to those interested in education, career development, healthcare, and business. My name is Harry, and I'm a 5th year medical student. Joining me today is a junior doctor, or an intern if you're watching from North America. In today's episode, we're going to focus on the journey and the challenges of women who's trying to enter into a career in surgery. So let's just get right into it. Do you mind giving us a quick 10-second introduction of what's your name, what did you do, and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. I'm Greer, so I am from Palmerston North originally, and I went to Otago Medical School, and I am now a PGY4 working in the emergency department.
Awesome. So PGY4 means it's 4 years
since
you've
my
graduated.
4th year since I've graduated. Yeah.
And you went to Otago Uni, right?
Yeah, Otago.
Yeah. We're going to be arguing upon this.
It's the better.
It's definitely the second best in our country. So yeah.
No, it's the OG. Like you can't beat it. It was original for the reason.
True.
Yeah.
All right. So I always start off by asking my medical guests, why do you choose a career in medicine? Why do you want to go to medical school? So
like I like science and like math and stuff, and so I was tossing it between engineering and like healthcare. And my mum was a radiotherapist, so she did like the cancer treatment, and she was like, oh, you need to choose something that, you know, has got a lot of options because you'll get bored easy. And so I was like, oh, I really like chemistry, maybe I'll try pharmacy. So then I went down to Otago, and then I did the first year like health science, so that's kind of general for like physio, dentistry, med lab sci, medicine, all that. So yeah, just went down with like low expectations. My uncle was like, you know, you're a big fish here, but you'll be a small fish in a big pond, because like I went to a public school. It was a good school, but like not like private school money, you know, like I'd never done like prep for UMAT. Like they'd done the English school exams instead of NCA. So they kind of already
Cambridge.
So they kind of knew some of the content already, so I kind of felt like you couldn't even really compare yourself, because you know, you just started at a different point. So
it seems like it's like quite a few of my other guests, it's, you know, you went into first year uni, there's a range of careers that you wanted to go for, and medicine's the one that you got into. And
actually, I got into dentistry and I got waitlisted. I got waitlisted for medicine.
Oh, right.
I don't know if it's because they don't have an interview for medicine, whereas dentistry they did. And I feel like I'm quite a personable person. So like I think I interviewed well, so therefore got onto dentistry. It's harder to get into dentistry.
Is it?
Yeah. So they only take 60 and they only take 30 first years. So that's like huge, like, yeah, it's pretty hard to get into.
Sure.
But then obviously because people just tick every single box, you know, like I got a place like just after Christmas, like the middle of January, which was cool.
Absolutely. Nice. So let's move on to the sort of the mainstay of this episode then. So when it comes to, obviously when we become a medical student, everyone around you sort of starts asking you what kind of doctor do you want to be, you know, what specialty do you want to do,
That
when
question
did you
doesn't go away, by the way. You
It doesn't
still
go
get it
away.
every single time you talk to a boss.
Sure. So when did you and how did you first start to have an idea of what you'd like to do? You know, you've got your stethoscope. You're about to go to work after this session. So
yeah. So I have always wanted to do orthopaedics since I was 4th year. So I did. My surgical run was orthopaedics that year, the sub-spec one, so you could do plastics and stuff, and I had ortho, and I was in this clinic in Burwood, and it was a 6-week total hip joint replacement follow-up clinic, and people were bringing chocolate and wine, and everyone was happy and just so grateful about their new hip, that their quality of life changed overnight. They weren't in pain and they could actually walk again. So I was like...
And sorry, so is that placement random or is it by choice?
Nah, I think you get to preference, but
Sure.
And I was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool, I'll have a look. And I was just after that I was like, yeah, dream job.
Sure.
Didn't really know what it entailed, but I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. If you can do a surgery that's technically elective but changes someone's quality of life that much, wow. For it only took you an hour and a half and you've changed this person's life. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to do orthopedics. And
ever since then, are there any other options that kind of came into mind, or has it always been the number one and you've...
So I've dabbled in a few things. So ortho was number one. I did a research project in my 5th year with Professor Gary Hooper, and we were looking at uni knee replacements versus totals, and not many places in New Zealand do the uni, but it's at half the knee. So it's only normally the medial side that's the osteoarthritic. So
the worn out.
Yeah, medial, so you just have a half new knee joint, and the outcomes, and then also under 55 male group compared to over 75, because if you're young and you have a knee replacement, you're going to thrash it a lot of the time.
True. Because people are
becomes
more,
loose.
More active.
Yeah, because they go and try to do what they were doing previously, and then they're finally not sore. So with knees, very important to hold out for as long as possible.
Sure.
They don't like doing them on young people because they only last about 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I also really like Women's Health, so ONG, and I often just do internal moonlighting locum shifts, because it's pretty amazing to be able to birth a baby. Yeah, ONG, and then now that I've been in ED, have been quite enjoying the trauma side of it.
I guess you're kind of at the crossroad now where you have to step up and really decide a specialty that you want to go for. So
some people are super lucky and just stick to their guns, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I've always wanted to do this. But for me, I always just wanted to be a mum, so I was like, well, I was in ONG, and then obviously I've seen lots of people having issues conceiving, or miscarriages, or complications in pregnancy, or stillbirth, really awful things, and I was like, oh, I've never tested my fertility, and there's something that clicks, and it clicks at a different time in every woman.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, and I was on my long day, so our long day is 8 till 10:30 p.m, so 15 hours.
Yep.
And I was holding this newborn baby, because you can sometimes do that on the postnatal ward, if mum wants to have a shower or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was just crying, and I was like, this is weird.
And when was this?
So that was February 2022.
That would be your second year out of med school.
Yeah. And I was like, okay. And so I may have removed my own Jadel. That's another story.
Sorry, removed your...
Jadel, so it's the contraceptive rod in your arm.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that came out. And then I didn't even, get any menstruation, and then I was pregnant and I didn't even realise. Yeah.
Sure. So
so I thought I'd give myself a year, and in that time would have stepped up to Reg, been is it worth it, is it not? But obviously
that would have been
had
good
you done
timing. That would have been the quick, because most people after 2 years they start stepping up, right?
Yeah, and I've definitely always been ready and capable, from about maybe even halfway through second year, the bosses were like, yeah, you should step up, and they are stepping up quite a lot of PGY2s at the moment because everyone's burnt out.
Yeah.
not necessarily a good thing. But yeah, so I was like, I just really want a baby.
Sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, so just relating to one of your previous videos that I've watched, you did mention that, I've done my due diligence.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have to plan not to be pregnant in the next year or two, so you've got the ability to try do some surgical training.
Yeah.
Do you mind going into that a bit more detail and, that decision in the context for our female kind of junior colleagues to
I will,
what it's like?
Yeah. So like, okay, you can be a really good pregnant and you can be a really horrific pregnant, and unfortunately I'm the latter. So
sure.
I didn't eat for like 35 weeks. Like I was like 30 kg less than when I got pregnant. Like lucky I had some excess, so it was okay. But I know that I wouldn't be able to operate pregnant because I was just so unbelievably nauseous, and my mum had hyperemesis and was inpatient for both her pregnancies.
Sure.
So there's like quite a high chance that I'll probably need admission at some point in the next pregnancy because it gets worse every pregnancy. So I know that I'm not going to be in any state to be, trying to get into theatre. I don't even know if I'd be able to manage clinic, to be honest. So for me, like, we have to really plan in advance. Like, I'm planning for the worst case scenario. I mean, maybe I'll be great and thriving, but likely probably like 90% chance that I won't be. So yeah, and also like I had quite a large baby, so he did quite a bit of damage, so I wanted to wait a long time.
Some recovery time.
Yeah. And it is a huge strain on your body as well. Like we still now haven't even got like regular exercise in our routine yet. Like I'd like to be able to do that and actually have some time for ourselves first. Yeah, so no babies next year.
Yeah. I've seen there's like female consultants that I've seen.
Yeah.
I don't know, they're like mid-30s and they've got 3 kids and like, they're ortho surgeon and I just don't know how to do it.
Oh my gosh. They probably have a nanny and they have a very supportive family and husband probably, honestly.
Yeah.
And also, I think having a kid just gives you like these special superpowers, that extra push, like just to keep going because you can't stop. Like when you get home from work, it's actually more chaotic than being at work. Like that 5 till 7 p.m. bedtime rush, like any mum will know, is like the hardest part of your day. Like, and then you can finally take a big deep breath at 7 o'clock when they're in bed. And then sometimes they decide not to go to sleep and then you have to fight them to sleep. So it's like,
true.
Yeah.
It's
like you come home to your full-time job after going to your full-time job. Wow. And then the weekends, you're like, how do I entertain this little man? Like, I don't know.
True. So after you've had your first child, would you say it's kind of changed your career focus or are you kind of still at the crossroad where you haven't really decided?
I think it puts everything into perspective and your time just all of a sudden becomes a lot more precious because you don't have a lot of it. Like, I don't know what I was doing after work back in the day because I should have been some fitness model. Like I should have been like, exercising every day because like that's a luxury, but now I'm like, I'll sit on the couch for like 40 minutes and then go to bed like after I've done like all the chores.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah.
I think like, and then you go back and it doesn't become as important. Like I was really career focused and very passionate and like really, really wanted to do surgery. Like if you asked me, like if I'd sacrifice everything, I'd be like, 110%. But now I'm like, actually, what's probably more important is that I actually get occasional weekend off to see and be a family and like not miss out on things like that.
Yeah.
And
there's certain milestones that you don't want to miss your child going through, and you only see your child growing up once, right?
Yeah, and like also what also puts me off a bit is having to move every year because that means a new daycare or a new school, and like some kids do well, but some like routine and like would get quite unsettled, so I think that would be quite stressful as well.
Are there any particular specialties that's more or less accommodating for family in terms of the training?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the few that I'm kind of semi-interested in. So Also, you can do part-time. You just have to work that time back later on. So say if you wanted to come, some of them came back like 0.7 or 0.8, so they would have a set day off a week that they didn't work at all.
Sure.
And then they just have to work that time, gets tacked on at the end. So that works quite well.
Before they get their fellowship.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then O&G, you can take, they like you to take like either 6 months or a year out. And that's fine. But I don't necessarily think there's much option for part-time training until you've like finished your exams.
Sure.
So you're like a senior registrar.
By exams, do you mean the part ones?
So they have part twos as
part
well.
Twos,
yeah. They have part ones and part twos. But yeah, once you've done part twos, you've still got like a year or two, I think, of clinical stuff and then fellowship. And then ED is probably the most flexible. Like you can ask for whatever you want. And
shift work.
Shift work. So you just like one of the girls, she's just having her second child recently, and she like did basically permanent night shift. So it's just like what works for your family.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I talk to my family about, because doing emergency medicine ED, it's on my list as well.
Yeah.
And I was telling them that there's actually a decent work-life balance in doing ED. And my family was just like, are you
people
crazy?
Don't believe
People
it.
don't understand it. But I don't know if, and you can see if you agree with me, but I think that part of work-life balance is having a set schedule.
Yeah.
Or not even set schedule, but knowing when you're going to be done, when you're going to start. So doing shift work allows that to happen. Yeah,
so I was talking to one of the bosses, and there's actually not that many like full-time 1.0 FTs at Waikato. A lot of them are part-time. So
like consultants.
Yeah, consultants. And he said that he has to do 12 clinical shifts facing a month, and they have to do so many 8 till 6s, so many 1 till 11s, and so many 4 till 2s. Like they're like swing shifts.
What do you mean by clinical facings?
Like on the floor, running the department.
Sure. Sounds like a very good and maybe not completely well balanced, but compared to some specialties, decent career to go for.
And the bosses like all have hobbies, and they all have time to do their hobbies. You know, they all like mountain biking,
like cool people as well.
Hockey, soccer. Like a lot of them are coaches for their kids' sports team, so they might not work Saturday morning, but they'll work the Sunday or the Saturday PM. But they've all played like a game of hockey or like soccer or whatever. So it's nice like that they all have hobbies that they actually get to do, and it's also self-rostered, so you go, okay, I'm happy to work this weekend, and within reason. It's fine. Whereas like other jobs, you're still dictated by a rosterer. You need to be on call this weekend. If you can't do it, you have to swap. And
I've heard that orthopedics, when consultants are on call, they don't come into the hospital.
No, that's not true. I mean, especially, so there's 2 different types of call. There's spine call. So that's like obviously a really serious emergency. So they come in, and if it's like a case that, so the consultants always come do the round in the morning. So they're there till at least probably like 12. Because they'll often do some cases that they couldn't have get done during the week. And then often they might just like go to town or whatever, but they usually stick close by. They have to be within 30 minutes of the hospital at any time.
What do you mean by go to town?
Well, you know, like go to their grocery shopping, or
or go
to
play golf
Kmart.
or something.
I don't know, like or bike, go for a bike ride.
When you said go to town, I thought like go to
town. No. I mean, but I think they do come in, but not as often as other specialties. So probably like neurosurge is the one that gets called in the most. Absolutely. And then vascular, and then obviously O&G as well, that they come in. And then in ED, we don't have it one on site from 2, but they're on call till 8. So if there was, say, like a major trauma with more than one patient, and usually we get like a 20-30 minute heads up, we would call the boss and be like, hey, please come in, like, you've got a code red coming in, like, see you soon. So, but they actually don't get called in that much, which is pretty good.
Sure. When it comes to entering a surgical training program, are you also thinking about bulking up your CV or doing some courses or doing research or anything like that, and balancing it with studying and trying to take care of your newborn?
I do not have the time to build up my CV, unfortunately, at the moment. So I thought I was real smart, and I sat my part 1 anatomy exam when I was like 25 weeks pregnant, but I like failed by 1%.
That's the GSSE.
So if I was to like want to apply for surgical training, I have to study for that again, which just feels yuck.
Yep.
So, and then, so you've got to do volunteering, which I don't have any time for. Probably do some audits or some research in that kind of field that you're interested in. So most people I know that are getting on orthopaedics are like PGY 6 or 7. So, but they have like built their CV up during medical school. So like I did do some research, which would count. But you've also got to present at paper day, which is once a year. You've got to do some of the RACs, the College of Surgeon courses. So there's like EMST, critical care, blah, blah, blah. You get like half a point each for those. Then if you do a master's, I think you get 2 points.
I know someone who's trying to do a PhD from mid school, and because they want to go into the orthopedics. Wow.
So like as well, like vascular, a lot of them do PhDs. Like actually one of the vascular trainees, she's put off her training for the last 3 years because she's had 2 young kids, and has done her PhD in that time, and then has started training this year, but has had a space for the last 3 years. Which is wild.
But she's in the training program, right?
She got on to training, deferred it for the PhD.
Are there any specialties that's sort of less demanding in terms of how thick your CV is?
So radiology is quite a good one if you've kind of got a surgically built CV, like if you've got your GCSEs or some surgical reg experience, then that's quite a good one, and you can usually get on probably the first or second time. It's becoming more popular because people are realizing that they don't want to be a slave to the system, or like, for me, I'd be lucky if I'd be a consultant in 10 years time as an orthopedics or like plastics or something like that. Like those sub-spec surge is really difficult to get onto. Probably the hardest would be ped surge, because they only take 1 to 2 people from Australasia a year, and vascular's Australasia as well, so Australia and New Zealand combined.
Neurosurgery
and
neurosurge
as well. I think urology is New Zealand, ortho's New Zealand. Ortho's got about 15 spots. Gen surge is about the same. I think anaesthetics is one that people tend to get on quite quickly. So
it's getting more popular.
There's like a HDU, ICU step up SHO job, which is really popular at Waikato. I think there's an ICU SHO job that was new in Dunedin this year that my friend did that they really enjoyed. So doing something like that and then applying for training after that is pretty popular. ED is pretty reasonable to get onto. O&G is like if you do the diploma and then you've got good references, you probably get on.
Like diploma of...
the women's health diploma. There's the Otago or the Auckland one, and there's also a certificate, but I think you get 2 points for the diploma. And also you get extra letters. And it's quite good, that diploma or the PEDS diploma, if you end up in primary care, that counts as your like extracurricular study. Otherwise you have to self-fund it. Whereas the DHB pays for
the training.
And it's like 16k.
Wow.
Because it's postgraduate study.
Sure. And how difficult have you found balancing having a young child and being a junior doctor?
You choose your hard. So it's hard. It's a hard time of your life, no matter when it happens. I chose it quite early on in my training, so obviously there's challenges when I'm going to get onto a training program, challenges building up my CV, and challenges probably sitting exams will be my hardest thing. I'm going to have to like be very, very productive in the time that I do have. Like, I don't know if I'm going to have to either get up at like 5 a.m, study till Archie wakes up at 6:30, or like, study like in my lunch break at work, study when he goes to sleep from like 7 till 9, like just, like
the best life balance ever.
It sounds great. Like work all day, study all night.
Sounds great.
Do it all over again. So that's going to be hard. But there's no such thing as balance. Like you can have everything you want, but you don't get it at the same time. So like last year, so I've nearly been back at work a whole year to the end of July, and my son's 16 months. So I went back at 5 months, which is pretty early. Like, he was still a little baby, and I still, like, was breastfeeding and all that. So, like, and I think it's just, you know, we're often expected to stay late as a doctor.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unpaid overtime because you're just expected to get the job done, and sometimes some days the workload is just way more than you're going to get done in that time. But obviously now I have to pick up my kid before 5:30.
I suppose that gets worse when you're training, when you're trying to step up in training as a surgeon, because you can't just, you know, time's up, I'm going to put the liver back in now and just go and
so
pick up
in
my
like
kids.
an ideal world, I would have been like ortho-regging this year.
I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here. I don't want to sound like I'm victim blaming or anything, but don't you think that it's perhaps something that you would have planned or thought of before getting pregnant or having a child? Like is this something that you planned, because had you not had the child, maybe you could now just step up into your surgical career or training more comfortably?
I think, like, if I hadn't had Archie, I would have been, my CV would have looked like quite good. It doesn't look good at the moment. It would have been like, maybe I could have applied for next year or the year after. And maybe got on, you know. But I also, what was more important to me was being able to be young enough that I could run around after my kids.
Sure.
Like, I didn't want to have to wait till I was a consultant and then have to have IVF and all that. So.
Sure. But that's,
And then I was having a chat with...
Some people do that, but that's the price you pay for wanting to have everything exactly the way you want it, right?
Yeah, and like I was having a chat with one of the consultants. He's got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so he's kind of in a similar life position, but he's a boss. And he's like, man, I wish I'd done this when I was younger. Like, good on you for having them now, because, like, actually when you're a boss, there's a lot more responsibility. Like, for me, there's like a senior reg and then a consultant at the moment. But then when you're a consultant, it's you. So if you're exhausted because your baby is a crap sleeper, you still have to make those clinical decisions. You've got people, your juniors coming to you. Like, it's not an easy way out either. Like, it's hard whenever you choose to have a kid in medicine.
Yeah, it tends to, within kind of medical students at least, we tend to think that once you get to a boss, a consultant level, the world just changed, and
it doesn't.
Everything just becomes sunshine and rainbows.
And as your first couple years as a consultant is like similar to that step up from house officer to reg, is what I've been told. So it's super stressful. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think I'd want to be doing that with like just having a newborn. I think it's also hard slightly as a female, because you are like, I did breastfeed for quite a while till he was 10 months, and I think they need you so much when in that first year of life, but I think it's actually fine afterwards. But like, obviously the dude gets a couple of weeks off work but then just goes back to work. Like, obviously they're sleep deprived and all that, but actually their training doesn't stop, their CV building continues. Whereas for females, like, I couldn't have like done much for my CV in that time. So it's just, it's a bit like unequal how it affects your progression. Like, one of the ortho reggers, he had his first kid in like first year, now has like 4 kids, he's on training, whereas if it was reversed and he was a female...
Sorry, first year of...
working,
so postgraduate year 1.
Yeah. You know, like, but whereas if it was me who had the 4 kids, I would be nowhere near close to applying for training, you know? Definitely. So I think that there's definitely a gender mismatch, purely just because of like genetics, and obviously you can't grow a baby. And
absolutely. Yeah. And you do see that in the stats. I think the last time I looked at it, only in all the surgical, not just any kinds of medicine, but in surgical, there's, I think the gender difference is like 15. The last time I looked was like 10 to 20%, only 10 to 20% female.
I think it is getting better. Yeah. It is getting more female friendly.
Sure.
Because I think that those specialties are seeing like what women can actually bring, because it kind of balances everything out. Like if you've got a boys club, which Orthopaedics has been known for many years,
Ortho bros.
the Ortho bros, like the jocks, like they're just like children sometimes when they're in the meeting, you know. But if you have like a calm kind of presence, or like actually like, hey, actually think about it in this way, it kind of like dulls it down a bit. Like we've got some really awesome young female orthopedic consultants in New Zealand, a couple actually in Waikato, and a couple that have just finished fellowship. And honestly, like they're just bring them down to earth, and they're like, no, like think about it. And that's quite cool to see. Like, so I think there is a place for women in surgery, but it's just how much you want it and what you want the next 10 years of my life to look at. And like in that time I could have been an ED consultant for 5 years or an O&G consultant for 5 years. So I think like I'm gonna have to do it just so that I've done it, to hopefully put that chapter to bed and be like, I like it, but I don't like it enough to commit 120% of my life.
And sacrifice everything else that's going on.
And also it's like a joint decision between your family, because like we don't have any family support. So like I'm working 3 weekends in a row at the moment. And
so we're nearing the end of our episode now, so I've just got a few questions that I want to kind of clarify or ask if you know the answer to. So
good.
How would you rank, say, you know, the surgical specialties, and what's the sort of most time and energy demanding ones compared to the least? Just because you're kind of at the point where you want to choose. So if I am to ask someone who's more senior, they might be more biased.
So I would say probably the most busiest is plastics, ortho, gen surge, and vascular, probably. And then in Waikato, we're a tertiary centre, so then there's like cardiothoracic. ENT is a pretty good surgical lifestyle, just very hard to get onto. But they do like callbacks, and cardiothoracic, and then also urology is quite good because they don't do night call. That's actually covered by gen surge, so that's pretty good as well. I think that's all of them. Oh, and ped surge is quite busy. But
how about like obstetrics and gynecology?
Or
anaesthesia?
So anaesthesia is a category B. So you on average will work 60 to 65 hours, and O&G is a Cat A, so it's 65 plus. As a reg. So anaesthetics, you do quite a lot of nights in anaesthetics, and some long days and stuff as well, and it can be quite busy, but it can also be quite sedentary if you're just like in theatre and stuff with the boss. But I think that anaesthetic on calls are pretty busy. O&G is very busy, obviously. On calls like are pretty stressful, and they don't often eat dinner or lunch on their long days
for obstetrics and gynecology.
But at least they do like a grand round, so you don't have to round on your patients if you're not working that weekend, which is nice. And same with plastics and vascular, neurosurge. But whereas gen surge and ortho, you're expected to come in on a Saturday morning, and sometimes you might have like 40 or 50 patients, so that could take you a good like 2 to 3 hours. They often come in at like 7 and like round early, and so it doesn't like.
So it seems like it's gen surge, ortho, and then slightly below you've got plastics,
vascular,
plastics, vascular, and cardiothoracic, and then urology, ENT.
Are pretty good. But basically, once you get onto training, it's like every day's a job interview, right? Like if you want to work in the place that you're working that year, like you've got to be on all the time. You can't just be like 50% there, you know, like even if you've had the worst sleep ever, and like they really frown upon like calling in sick. You can't call in sick unless you're like dying, whereas obviously other places are like, oh yeah, you're sick, oh, that's okay, like hope you get better soon. So it's such a drastic difference in like expectations, I think.
Would you say there's a gender preference when it comes to surgeon training programs?
There's supposed to not be. And supposedly you get like an imaginary point if you're female in the orthopaedic training. This year a few got on, but I think it was last year was like 13 or like it was more than 50% were females that got on, which is wild. It was great. So I think now they're more trying to
embrace diversity.
Yeah, I think so, and like just not go for like the stereotypical, because otherwise the specialty is never going to change. Like the vibes are never going to change if you're always picking the same people. So I think they're starting to realise that actually if you've got a few different people with different interests, it actually makes the department work better and kind of more cohesive. So I think it's definitely not as prevalent anymore. Like I probably like 10 years ago was, but now I think they just look at you as a whole and like what you can bring to the specialty and what you bring to the table as a person rather than if you're like female or male.
Final question before we finish off this episode. Thanks to anyone who's still tuned in, but how was your first day back at work after maternity leave?
Yeah, so, well, my first day in GP, like, it was, I didn't know how to use a computer system.
Sure.
So that was quite difficult.
They must have been using MedTech or something like that.
Yeah, it was, was it MedTech? Indice.
Yeah.
But, like, I wasn't actually that emotional. Like, I was kind of happy to be using my brain. Like, I dropped him at daycare and I was like, yes, like, I'm going to use my brain today.
Were you kind of excited to get back into it?
Yeah, I was ready. And like I went back so early. So age-wise at daycare was perfect because he didn't have that stranger danger. He wasn't upset. He was still a baby, so he didn't really know what was happening. He just got cuddled and was happy about that. And so that was good. I think like my first day back at the hospital though, so that was when he was 8 months old. And I was on a really busy general surgical team. We had like 60 patients and I was like, okay, I have to pick up my kids, so I have to leave by 5. Like, I'm sorry if there's heaps of work to do. We're going to just have to hand it over to the on-call. And it made it harder maybe like this quarter from this year because it was like all the brand new doctors, so they're like really fresh. And I know you've got to start somewhere, but if like for me, I'd been doing the job like 3 years, so it's well over like just learning it. And it's just so hard when you just have to do everything because no one knows how to do anything. It's not that they're bad at their job, but like it's such a steep learning curve that like first 3 months of work. So that was hard because I didn't have any patience because I was tired. Whereas normally like I'm quite happy to teach and quite like welcoming of like students or like new staff and stuff, but just didn't have any empathy left.
All the patience left.
No patience left. Had all been used up. So that was hard. All
right. Well, look, thank you for this quick or not so quick conversation. I was planning to aim this under 40 minutes, but we went over time, but that's okay.
Yeah, you can cut out the boring bits.
That's fine. We'll put some juicy bits on TikTok, and if you want to check out Gria's TikTok, be sure to check out the description below. I'm gonna link it down there, and otherwise, any final words?
I think like if you're like going into medicine and you're like a female and you're young, like don't be put off. Like there is really good parts, but I guess it's just what you want your life to look like, because I do get a bit of like, I guess kind of jealousy when the girls in like antenatal and stuff, they've got like good jobs but they're a lot more flexible, and like if they want to take an afternoon off they can, or like the ability to pick up their kid if their kid's sick, because often like Dave, my partner, picks up Archie if he's sick because it's quite disruptive to the work day. Or I guess I could pick him up if like all the main jobs are done from like ward rounds or whatever, but so I guess not having that flexibility. And if you want to do something, you can do it. You just got to put your mind to it. But like just know that it's probably going to be harder if you have kids younger, but like I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I have no regrets. Like some days I'm like, what the hell am I doing? But other days I'm like, it's going to be worth it, you know. And I think you have to look at what the consultants' lives are like, because you're going to be doing that for like at least 20 years, maybe like 30. So I think look at what their life's like, ask them if they've got time for their hobbies and their kids, because I guess it's just more, you can work yourself silly, but actually what do you want your day-to-day life to look like.
And there's also subspecialties
Yeah.
within each big specialty, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely an
and you
option
could
there.
like do ortho fully private if you wanted to, and only work 2 days a week, which would be lush. And some of the consultants only work part-time. They do like 0.6 or whatever, but they still, like, if you work part-time in a hospital, you always work more than your subscribed part-time. But there's always options. And you just make it work for you, I guess.
Absolutely. A good thought to finish off the podcast. So thank you so much for being on here.
That's all good.
And
thanks for having me. Well, if anyone has any questions, you can send me a DM.
Send her a cheeky DM on TikTok. And otherwise, stay fit, stay strong, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
See ya.
Cool. Done. Thank you.
That's all good.
Yeah. Everything's recorded. Oh, amazing.
It actually worked, which is good.
This is like the part that I'm always scared of. When nothing's recorded.
Oh, yeah. What's on that?